I'm just going to start out by saying this is the complaint. It's not all the, response and find out what actually happened here. This is filed by an employee, and it's filed as a class action against Glass House, which is one of the bigger conglomerates here in California. And they have manufacturing, which is growing it. They have distribution. They have shape changing of it. They have their hands in a lot of different parts of this. And what I've done many times for cannabis companies starting up is I've set up, corporations. I've set up management corporations. We bring in employment corporations, we do all the contracts. And we do this to protect the owners, the entities under California law from debts, from being sued and things like that. And it tends to work pretty well until you get an employee pissed off and decides to make a labor board claim. Now, what they're alleging is that Glass House put them under so much pressure that they were forced to put their time into the work they weren't compensated for. They weren't given their rest breaks, meal breaks. And if they were fired, they weren't paid fully because they owed them money. And all of this falls under a group of laws in California we call the Private Attorney General Act. And it's been on the books for a while. But it applies to wage and hour complaints, primarily from employees. And these are draconian because unless you can prove beyond, and not a reasonable doubt, but as an attorney, I want my client to give me what I call clear and convincing evidence that this employee's allegations are bullshit. Because if I don't have that, then I'm looking at how much money is it going to cost me to settle these cases. Because it is difficult, if not impossible, to defend these statutory claims, we call them. If somebody says, hey, I worked 4 hours and I didn't get a break, and you don't have documentation, clear documentation, they actually got their break, you're going to be paying some money if you fire them or if they make these claims. Same thing with meal breaks. If they're using some piece of equipment, typically a cell phone, if they're using their own cell phone, you're not compensating them, that's a labor code violation. Okay, it just goes on and on. If you give them a statement of here's how many hours you worked and what we paid you, if it doesn't have all the requirements in it, labor code violation. And all of these, under these private attorney general theories, come with attorney's fees to the prevailing party. Now, if you're the employee and you win, the employer's writing you a check not only for what they won, but for all their attorney's fees. And this shit will kill a company. I'm just telling you right now. And if the employer wins, you've got to prove that the claim was brought in bad faith, or you don't get your attorney's fees. Okay? It's like when I go into these fights, I tell my clients I'm fighting with one hand tied behind my back here. So, as a cautionary tale for anybody out there in the cannabis industry running a business with employees, if you don't have someone that knows about HR in your business, you better find them. Because Glass House is about to get spanked here, okay? Because I handle these things. Our firm does this. We represent employers. We set these all up. And if the employer's doing something without clearing it through HR or their attorney, and you're looking at trouble. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these small employers, they can't afford to pay attorneys to answer the phone and talk about, well, my employee did this or they did that. What do I do with it? Or having an established HR department. So, the heartbreakers are like social equity clients. I've got some of those, and they get one of these claims filed against them. They're struggling just to get off the ground. And they got some employees they're trying to do right by them. They think they're following all the rules, and there's some technical violations. And, the come to Jesus talk is this may cost you your business. Okay, it's real hard to have those discussions. So this is a cautionary tale for anybody in California. Our labor laws can burn you and close down your business if you're not careful. And for anybody in any other states opening a cannabis business, HR is there to protect your company, not your employees. The laws do that. If you don't have HR to protect you, this is like practicing defensive medicine. You've got to be able to hand to me a case that's ironclad, and I can tell the other side to kiss my ass, we ain't paying you a nickel. And it's still going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself. I'm going to throw this back at you for anybody in the industry. Be careful. If you got some experience, let me hear it. But Glass House is going to teach a lot of employers a lot of bad things about running a business in California with employees. So back at you guys. What do you think?
Man, oh man.
And there's so much on this right here. I think that we as an industry are a target for a lot of things. There is a perception that because you own a cannabis business that you are very wealthy. And also there are a lot of opportunities for employees to, really maneuver themselves in such a way within your business to when they depart, they can find so many different things to come back and file against you to make life difficult. It's scary as a business operator in cannabis to have to terminate an employee now because you don't know what they're going to retaliate against you for or how they're going to respond. It is very scary. I've had to lay off and terminate employees. Those are two different things. But there is a very, very fine line between making sure that you're following all the laws in your requirements as a business operator and keeping an eye and tracking the fact that you are abiding by the laws, because you have to be able to CYA even after you've gotten rid of this employee. And on the Glass House tip, one thing that really sucks, and this is not just for Glass House, but this is also for any of the larger players. This is one of the burdens that you have to bear, being, the big kid on the boat. This is one of the shitty parts, and it's not all glamour and glitz for the big operators all the time.
No,
Mandy, would you call that the glass tip?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I like that.
I mean, I'm a little confused a little bit by this, because it says that they hire. You're claiming, Dale, that they created a separate company strictly to hire the employees. I thought that under the state law, the licensed company had to employ the workers. So how did they get that workaround?
Well, the only requirement that a cannabis company that has to have employees are delivery. Okay? You have to be an employee of a retail, be a delivery driver. So I've set these companies up where each license is held by a separate corporation. We have a management corporation. I represent clients who go out and do trimming and other things like that they try to take some of the labor costs and put them other places. But what California has done is they've decided to make it relatively easy to bust through all these corporate veils, we call them. We set them up for protection. But if you're a wage and hour employee and some director did something or a shareholder was involved in it or a company doesn't have enough money to pay you, they start busting through this to get to your personal assets. No other kind of debt gets to do this, okay? So it's like I said, I go to bat with one hand, sometimes two hands tied behind my back. These companies that are struggling to make payroll, I tell them, you got to budget $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 for legal fees and other expenses to defend yourself, and that's not settling the case. And for Glass House, this is going to stretch potentially into the millions of dollars. And I don't know that you have this money just sitting around. It's difficult, if not impossible, to insure for it. Okay, that's another. Even if you could get the insurance, it's hard to have it cover things that are claimed to be negligent or intentional acts that violate laws. I mean, it's a mess. It is and I don't have a good answer. Every compass heading is like, I got to tell you, you got cancer. We're going to have to start some bad stuff on you. We're going to cut your arm off or whatever. I've had those discussions. And you sit down and close the door. It's like, it's time to have a come to Jesus talk here. That this may ruin your company. How are we going to do this? And what do you learn? And when I set these up, excuse me, I try to give people an idea what HR is, what the documents they need, that they're at least protected on paper. But if you don't follow up, and you're going to get in trouble in how you actually run it or how you can protect yourself if somebody claims you're not running it right. And that's where it boils down to problems of startups. You can't afford to have an HR person on staff. These PEOs that do HR, they cost money. When you're trying to pay bills, you got to have one of the owners as HR, okay? And you like, I read what it says, and it's like, yeah, but you ain't fucking doing it. And now we got trouble. What are we going to do now?
You know, there's also a huge overhead. I mean, this is just, we have to have HR in our industry. Bigger companies, if you don't have an entire department that's focused on your HR, you are just waiting to be sued. But for those smaller operators out there, you don't have to employ a full-time human resources manager. There are a ton of ancillary businesses out there that will provide this service to you at a fraction of the cost of hosting an employee in your office, that will provide, you know, employee screenings for interviews. They will do offers of employment. They will do terminations. They will do trainings for your staff. They'll do all the things for a fraction of the cost. So don't skimp on this. I can't emphasize how important this is. This is just as important as having insurance.
And I mean, I think a lot of it, what it comes down to, and this is what those third-party companies or consultants are going to use, is having really solid SOPs in terms of how you handle each of those processes and not to deviate from them. You know, for example, like, you know, if you work in the financial, like in fintech, and you get terminated, you're getting brought into your supervisor's office, potentially with an HR person. It might be a 5 or 10 minute meeting. You're being informed that you're being terminated, and depending on, I mean, by the time you get back to your desk, your access to email and everything has already been cut off. Yep. So there's no chance of you conducting any type of sabotage or stealing files or anything like that. And you might even be standing there with an HR or a security person who's letting you pack up your stuff and being walked out of the building. And that, you know, it's not because necessarily you were suspicious or you did anything wrong, but they have very specific protocols and SOPs in place on how to handle this stuff to mitigate the risk of whatever a disgruntled former employee might do. And we have different risks in cannabis, right? You know, there's stories about people going and spraying their former employer's crop with, you know, banned pesticides or other types of sabotage like that. So the risks are different, but the point being is there's, you know, if you set up the correct procedures and you abide by them, then you can mitigate a lot of that risk.
Well, I've had to deal with smaller employers that didn't document that they gave someone a rest break of 10 minutes every 4 hours, or that they gave them a meal break. They may have offered it to them, but they didn't have the proof that the person got it. Okay? And so when they come to me and I say, all right, I need a bulletproof defense, clear and convincing documents, preferably signed by that person, that yes, I got my rest break, yes, I got my meal break, yes, you paid me all my money, you know, or I got an adequate wage statement, or I didn't have to get dressed before I came to work in your clothes, that I clocked in and then I did all. I mean, that's the kind of shit that's in this glass house. I had to put my lab coat on my own time, so I'm going to sue you for that. That's the kind of nitpicky shit that will kill a company. If I'm trying to maneuver a company to raise $1 million+ to open a business, and they're trying to allocate money for everything, and there's only a handful of owners, because this is a small business, $1 million industry, $1 million business in our industry is small. You don't have the budgets. And very often you think, oh, I pulled up something off the internet, I got HR documents, but I don't have all the proof my attorney says I need. Well, bend over and write a big check to me, because I got to run a business too. I got employees to pay. I can't do this for free for you. And here's the reality, that you done fucked up because I can't defend you. Not a bad person, but I don't have the documents, the videos. I mean, with security cameras, I love it, because I can show the other side. This is what this idiot did. They fucking ran a red light, or, you know, whatever. They're one of them screaming at their husband and come back to the shop, and they've been in an accident. I don't know how it happened. Well, I'm watching the fucking video, you idiot. You know, when you're having a fight with your husband, you don't know what the hell you're doing driving a car. It violates policy. Your ass is fired. That's easier for me to defend. And I got to bring 10 witnesses in. So, well, that never happened. They never said it. Well, that's a liar's contest, and it's an expensive one. I'm happy to have it, but, you know, these cases are hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees. That's the big stick that they put over you to settle them. And I don't have a defense. Yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Something else that I just wanted to point out too is that in cannabis, businesses typically start out small. They're in startup mode for the first, couple months or years or whatnot, and then they grow. And it's easy from an HR perspective to be really lackadaisical when your team is itty bitty and you're all the executives, right? The second you bring anyone else onto your team that is not an executive, you must start following like real employment law, like start tracking, or you're just leaving yourself wide open for a disaster. And that means the executive team also needs to be paying attention to what they're doing and how they're behaving in front of the new staff. Be mindful. Growth requires change, and often that means more rules that you have to put in place.
Boy,
in an industry that doesn't like to follow rules, there you go. That's my dilemma. Pay me now or pay me later.
Side, y'all. This is the business side. You got to keep your game tight.
Well, wouldn't you say, Dale, that like for the industry, since you say it's an industry that doesn't like to follow the rules, that old habits die hard?
Well, exactly. And most of us are entrepreneurs. Let's just be clear. I've burned through 20 hours a day, 80-hour weeks for years and years. Like I did that, trying to set business up, get where I want to go. And so we think the whole world operates like that. Oh, it's just an extra few minutes, do a few things here and there. When you hire an employee, no. It's like you've got to follow the rules more importantly than for them, because if they say you didn't do something right and you come to me and I can't prove it, you're wrong and you're paying a lot of money. And it'll kill small businesses. Let's not make a mistake here. This can ruin a small business.
And to that point, Dale, too, like we have to remember that as the industry expands and our employment base becomes larger, that there's going to be more and more people that are doing this as a job, like as a paycheck, right? Like not everybody that is coming to do this necessarily has the same passion that we do for building businesses from the ground up, for entering at an early stage into the industry. And as such, they're going to be much more willing to view it through the lens of employment law violations versus, doing what they have to get the business going.
Well,
I have a friend that's got a trimming business. They're a bunch of old Hmong ladies, and they'll sit and trim for 12 hours, smoking their pipe and drinking their tea. You can never get away with that in the open labor market with following labor laws. I mean, these people know each other since Laos. They don't give a shit. They're not going to rat anybody out. That's the kind of thing that happens in the industry. But when you go into the labor law and have labor forces, someone's got to step in and say, stop, you got to go take a 10-minute break. Stop, you got to go to lunch. Stop, whatever. And you got to document.
And make them clock out.
Absolutely. And agree that I got my rest break, or give them an hour, okay, or whatever. It's mind-boggling, but it's the reality we got to face.
And we're